A different world.
Everybody out on the fence.
With its own rules. Often justice in their own hands.
In there, in the pool, we drown the sex offenders.
Zero tolerance.
Back to your cells.
Gangs. Violence. Drugs.
You can get all drugs inside.
And harassment.
I did it to make it tough.
And inhumane conditions. All this behind bars. In the world's toughest prisons. Derelict. Decayed. A condemned building? This isn't a condemned building. It's the biggest and most certainly the toughest prison in Bulgaria.
Best way to survive Bulgarian prison, have no hope.
Sofia Central Prison, 900 prisoners, hardened criminals, murderers. Nothing to do in a prison which time seems to have forgotten 100 years after it was founded. Permanent stop and search. Relentless guards and hardened criminals. At the drop of a dime, the eruption of violence almost a certainty, at any time. The guards regularly find contraband, self-made weapons.
This one has been sharpened and molded, so you can stab someone in the neck.
An extreme place, with extreme inmates, and only one rule: survival of the fittest.
If the other inmates notice a weakness, they'll eat you alive.
This is Sofia Central Prison, one of the world's toughest prisons. Sofia, Bulgaria's capital, a country on the very edge of Europe. A country that until recent history was behind the Iron Curtain. Bulgaria has a population of approximately 7 million people, with unofficially more than 2 million living in Sofia. This is a capital like no other in Europe. It is a city of extremes, where rich meets poor, dirt poor. In a member country of the European Union, too many struggle to get by on a daily basis. Just beyond the chic cafes and boutiques in the city center, the ghettos. Ghettos with no sewage system or electricity. Horse carts instead of cars. Neglected neighborhoods, choking in filth and garbage. Often the only option, crime. The Roma live here, the poorest of the poor. According to EU estimates, they make up approximately 10% of Bulgaria's population. In the middle of these extremes, Sofia Central Prison. Fortress-like. The foreboding building houses the largest and most notorious prison in the country. Behind thick walls, rusty fences, and endless rolls of barbed wire, approximately 900 prisoners from all over Bulgaria serve sentences ranging from 5 years to life. "10 a.m. Warden Traiko Venkov begins his shift. He is the commander of the day shift. Like many colleagues at Central Prison, he is a former soldier. All the guards on duty in the 8 different prison stations are under his command. These are the guards who keep Bulgaria's most dangerous criminals in check. Traiko Venkov is starting his 24-hour shift in the command center.
This is the operational management area of the prison.
Like most of the furnishings, even parts of the surveillance equipment are from the communist era. Retro, like this old tube screen Traiko Venkov uses to observe critical areas of the prison. After his military service, Venkov begins as a simple guard. he takes the long road to become shift supervisor, and after 28 hard years, commander of the guards at the notorious Sofia Central Prison. Established over 100 years ago, neglected for decades. Behind the main building, the prison yard and numerous barracks. Even from the air, the building's dilapidated state is clearly visible. In a country ridden by crime and corruption, there is barely money left to invest in penal institutions. Noticeable everywhere. 11 a.m., the main building. The prisoners bring their clothes to the prison laundry, a rare highlight for the inmates. A stress situation for the guards, as something as innocuous as laundry day can escalate into something more sinister.
Any incidents? Everything normal?
All quiet in this tract.
Okay.
The men who don't have laundry day use the time to stretch their legs outside the cells. Like a tiger in a cage, the inmates walk back and forth. A rare enough occasion, because the next lockup will come quickly. Like now, a call from the command center, head count and lockup.
You guys have to wait. Into your cells.
As soon as the alarm sounds, all inmates return to their cells as fast as possible. Whoever disregards orders, more on that later. The guards do not enter the area until it is completely clear and all inmates are in their cells. They never turn their backs on a loose prisoner. It would be foolish to turn your back on over 100 convicted felons. Without warning, a prisoner on the loose, in the middle of the hallway, showing off. This could take a turn for the worse. Luckily for the guards, the inmate decides to retreat into his cell.
Throughout the years, strict law and order, paired with discipline, has ruled in the prison in Sofia. We will never ease up on these provisions. And it has never happened, because we are armed.
Sofia Central Prison. Behind crumbling walls and rusty barbed wire, approximately 900 felons, serving sentences of between 5 years to life. Among those felons, all foreigners who were convicted in Bulgaria, traumatized refugees among them.
Before coming in Bulgaria, I don't know the prison here. If I know, I never come.
A brutal place. Inter-prisoner violence, DIY weapons, finding new hiding places for their illegal contraband. But why are the prisoners arming themselves?
10 guards, 15 guards, 20 guards beating one prisoner or two prisoners.
All this happening within the European Union at Sofia Central Prison, in the middle of the capital, in the midst of a torn country. A place where only the strongest, the toughest, and the most brutal survive. A prison where no European prisoner wants to be. Why? Not only is it desolate, derelict, and filthy, but because of the prison's use of solitary confinement. While international human rights organizations are rallying against this inhumane treatment, this buried alive confinement is still common practice in Sofia Central Prison.
The prison has 4 floors. In the area that we see here, on the first floor, we have the pre-trial detention cells, and they are completely isolated. Isolation cells.
Anyone who breaks the rules ends up here, isolated behind rusty bars for the next days or even weeks, with almost no natural light.
The second floor is also for pre-trial detainees. These rooms are completely isolated from the outside world.
Almost the entire wing is comprised of isolation and arrest cells. If you are a convicted felon on the 4th floor, you won't be leaving it anytime soon.
On the 4th floor, the prisoners of the so-called Group 7 are housed. These are the ones that have already received their verdicts, so they are currently serving their sentences, and they are all repeat offenders there.
The prisoners both hate and fear this part of the prison. The 1st, 2nd, and 4th floors of this wing are notorious. Here, you are completely cut off from the other inmates. We are not allowed access with our cameras. The wing with the isolation cells is part of the main building. The T-shape extends across the front of the prison grounds where all the wings meet in the middle, at the prison tower. 1st and 2nd floor, investigative custody and solitary confinement and group cells. 3rd floor, group detention for convicted prisoners. 4th floor, the feared arrest cells for repeat offenders and troublemakers. The facility is over a century old, painfully obvious at every turn. All prison tracts end at the so-called prison tower. Safety nets between floors are supposed to prevent murders and suicides. There have been several incidents, inmates trying to kill themselves or each other. The entire prison complex seems like from a distant past, every technical device hopelessly outdated. Here, the new arrivals get their pictures taken and information recorded by hand. Long hair is a paradise for lice and fleas in Sofia Central Prison. That's why a newbie entering the facility with long hair gets a haircut in old communist conditions. And these conditions most certainly exist in the cells too. Because even if our cameras often have to stay outside, secretly made videos circulate the internet documenting how the prisoners really live, in derelict cells, under appalling sanitary conditions. How tough is it on the inside? An ex-inmate knows. Ex-con Hamza. He was inside Sofia Central for 6 years. 6 years that have taken its toll.
I'm not really sure I want to do this. It's overwhelming. Just the thought of going back.
For the first time since his release from prison 6 months ago, the 44-year-old German who was convicted of drug smuggling returns to his worst nightmare.
This is what it looks like from the outside, yeah.
Until his release, Hamza had only known these walls from the inside. Now, as a free man, he stands safe and secure on the outside, but still cannot hide his trepidation being this close.
I know this guy.
Hamza had to serve his entire sentence in Bulgaria. Every foreigner convicted in Bulgaria ends up in Sofia Central Prison.
Oh, man. Not much has changed. It hasn't been that long.
When you ask Hamza what was the worst thing about this prison, he doesn't know where to start.
The thing that breaks you is the lack of hygiene and zero healthcare. Our cell, 9 people crammed into 130 square feet, 3 bunks on top of each other.
Claustrophobic conditions, damp, cold.
Water comes in from everywhere. Some of the prisoners cover the ceiling with plastic to avoid having the water drip onto the bed. During the winter, of the 24 hours of a day, maybe 1 hour is warm. People aren't worth anything in here.
EU regulation states in the European prison rules each inmate must have at least 4 square meters, 43 square feet. Bulgaria doesn't care. Barely 20 square feet per inmate in Sofia Central Prison. That's less than half. Commander Traiko Venkov's tour takes him to one of the barracks. Foreigners are housed here, just like Hamza 6 months ago. It is the newest building, built in the 1950s. But like all the other buildings, it is completely run down. The foreign prisoners know their rights, as opposed to the locals. And they also know conditions at home are much more humane than here. One reason this cell block belongs to the better ones, which doesn't do much for their popularity among the officers and other inmates. A few minutes pass before the prison door opens to reveal the inside of a cell. The guards are nervous. 8 inmates can be held in this cell. Jock Paul Freeman is one of them. The Australian was backpacking through Europe when one fateful night on a Bulgarian street, he tried to help someone. Jock says he tried to help a Roma attacked by neo-Nazis.
They were beating one man because he had dark skin, and I went to defend this man. The group of 15 then attacked me. I pulled out a knife and held it above my head and was shouting at them to leave me alone. And they continued attacking me, and they knocked me out. After about 10 minutes, one of the neo-Nazis was killed, and I was convicted for his murder. Not only do I not remember if I was the one who killed this neo-Nazi or not, but it's not been proven or confirmed by anybody.
Jock's account cannot be corroborated, but if it's true, then it's hard to fathom. According to Jock, the prisoners in Sofia Central Prison are beaten regularly by the guards.
It's for hours and hours on end. It's 10 guards, 15 guards, 20 guards beating one prisoner or 2 prisoners. They're separated from the other prisoners normally, and then after beating them, they keep them locked in separate rooms, try to isolate them from help from lawyers.
The Anti-Torture Committee of the European Union has repeatedly urged Bulgaria to prevent violence and arbitrariness against prisoners. According to Jock, mistreatment and abuse continues.
40 guards came running into that room, room number 11, and started beating everybody in there, and they were in their beds at the time. So they were sleeping in their beds. The guards came in, started beating them with batons, with their boots, and beating them with their fists. And the idea was absolutely, in the real sense of the word, terror, to make terror. The irony of this place is, this is maybe the only prison in Europe where they had to put security cameras in the prison because of the guards, not because of the prisoners.
The human rights organization Bulgarian Helsinki Committee claimed in 2015, in Sofia Central Prison alone, 2 recent cases of prisoner abuse by guards gained publicity. In one of the cases, several officers severely beat inmates even though they were not resisting officers' commands.
The law says guards may use force to control the prison. The way they interpret that is we can use force to terrorize the prison, and through terror we will control the prison. And that's why this prison is so hard.
Outside the prison walls, ex-prisoner Hamza remembers the abuse by prison guards. Like Jock, he agrees these attacks on prisoners are rampant and appear to be part of an agenda.
If one of the guards takes a swing, the others join in. They have no choice. They want to show they rule. In my opinion, they have no idea about the law.
Hamza also claims to have been a victim of the guards' sadistic physical abuse.
The guard locked the cell, then locked all the other cells, and then came back with 20 officers, opened the cell door, and beat everyone inside. They hit them on the back and kicked them. I was out there and in the corridor.
Gratuitous and systematic abuse on a large scale against the inmates. But according to Hamza, some guards have no self-control. In Europe's toughest prison, if you speak with the other side, the situation is completely different. Commander Traiko Venkov sees it as his most important task to ensure strict discipline. Inside the cells and outside in the prison yard, behind fences and wire, any unusual situation constitutes a threat. Traiko Venkov also reports of attacks, but of prisoners against the guards. An escape attempt gone horribly wrong is said to have happened 6 months ago.
During a baggage check, an occupant of the 12th group attacked one of the guards. The prisoner was able to overpower the guard and then tried to escape. During the altercation, he inflicted a stab wound and a gash on the guard's left arm and shoulder. The prisoner was arrested again.
Guards and prisoners seem to have engaged in a sort of guerrilla warfare for years now. But since a new director came on board in Sofia Central Prison, the crackdown on abusive guards has been significant. This has been confirmed by inmates. But according to the guards, the largest conflict potential comes from the prisoners, especially during the daily 90-minute yard time. Venkov says these 90 minutes are the greatest source of potential danger, which is why inmates are separated through fences.
This is the most dangerous area of the prison. If more than 50 inmates come together, there is always a potential danger.
Many of the inmates at notorious Sofia Central Prison display behavioral problems. While some react with aggression and violence, others isolate themselves completely. Each detainee reacts differently to harsh prison conditions.
Some prisoners are very introverted. They have no contact with other inmates in the group and rarely emerge from their cells. There are some prisoners who haven't been outside their cells for years. They have phobias and panic attacks.
If you want to survive in this house of horrors, you can show no fear. Otherwise, life behind the crumbling walls of Bulgaria's most notorious prison quickly becomes a living hell. Inmate Stanislav knows what that means. The repeat offender belongs to the tough guys. He knows Sofia Central Prison and its harsh hierarchy like the inside of his pocket. Currently, the 39-year-old is serving a 15-year sentence for murder with robbery. He has 3 more years to go. The 12 years he has served so far have turned him into a loner and the target of the other prisoners' hate. Which is why Stanislav does not participate in the common 90-minute yard time. He is considered unstable and has behavioral problems. Stanislav uses the time in one of the courtyard cages to do what seems to make the most sense: preparing for whatever may come. Stanislav works out every day. He wants to be prepared for anything and everything. He is convinced this tactic will save him.
If they see that you are weak, they'll eat you alive. They use this weakness against you and start bullying you. That's why you always have to be strong, tough, and aggressive.
One thing that Stanislav has learned behind bars: Here in Sofia, it's best to be a lone wolf.
In this prison, it's not like in other countries where the inmates are divided into gangs. It's every man for himself here. You're on your own. There's no strong gang whose members support you and have your back. It's every man for himself.
The hierarchy in Sofia Central Prison, some are on top, most are at the bottom. Symbolic and reflective of Bulgarian society. According to critical EU reports, the country has been ripped to shreds by corruption and crime, even years after joining the EU. And so, the super-rich Bulgarians find all the status symbols and luxury items they could ever want in chic boutiques. While those who are at the bottom, like the Roma, have to beg for pennies and food scraps. A conflict situation where violence and crime thrive. For years, Bulgaria has led statistics for the most contract killings within the EU. Asserting oneself, fighting and getting by, violence, even behind bars, works for most prisoners.
I was stabbed in the neck once.
Mostly, inmates fight each other with homemade weapons, inducing Commander Taiko Venkov and his team of guards to do searches of cells and inmates, often without warning. The prisoners themselves see the procedure as part of the harassment, as well as the continuous arbitrary lockups. The guards' successful measures bolster the methods. Again and again, they find contraband during the raids, like clubs and sticks. Self-made weaponry to stab and cut. Commander Venkov inspects some of the seized items.
This one here has been sharpened, enough to stab somebody in the neck. It really is the worst when you get stabbed in the face or neck. Very dangerous.
In their cells, the prisoners have a lot of time to make their deadly weapons and hide them. Take this dresser, for example. A relatively safe place to hide not only weapons, but also mobile phones or drugs.
Here, in the back, there is an additional partition, which has been installed parallel to this partition. The actual drawer ends here, but the inmates install another hidden drawer by extending it backwards. If the controlling officer checks the closet, he will only see this first compartment. The back remains hidden. The inmates hide all sorts of illegal items in there. That's why we've taken it away.
If the guards find contraband, then it's off to the feared isolation tract. The prisoners disappear behind these rusty grates. Hamza, the ex-convict, knows solitary confinement, but only as a visitor. As a professional locksmith, he helped with repairs, a way to shorten his sentence, despite it being in the feared isolation cells.
You get solitary confinement if you're caught with a cell phone, or drugs, or if you get into a fight. And of course, if you have a knife. That's when you go directly into isolation for between 7 and 14 days.
A 7 to 14-day sentence in isolation if a prisoner gets caught. But there are also inmates who spend their entire life sentences in isolation, locked away for 23 of 24 hours each day.
In isolation, you get an hour outside the cell, from 8:30 to 9:30. You get to walk around inside this cage. You aren't allowed to go into the general yard.
Detention and solitary confinement can be very traumatic. Here in Sofia Central Prison, in the middle of a European capital, in Europe, probably one of the toughest prisons on the continent. Hold-up murderer and repeat felon Stanislav has been in solitary confinement more than once.
I was there mainly because of fights. Once because I had a cell phone. So fights and cell phones. And once they planted drugs. Someone slipped them in my pocket. Other prisoners who hate me wanted to plant drugs on me. So I was sent to isolation.
Not only the cells themselves, but the hallways offer no daylight and are sealed off. And if there is a chance for company, it's usually pretty rough.
The isolation cells are in the same wing where the inmates doing life are located. If you're not here for murder, but are caught between murders, it messes with your head. Very few prisoners can handle this environment. Many slit their wrists or hang themselves.
Some prefer to die than be in isolation the whole time. Even Stanislav, one of the toughest here, reached to desperate measures.
I was in isolation a lot. And I started cutting myself just to get out of there.
It was a high price, but for Stanislav, it was worth it. Sofia Central Prison, a place where only the strongest survive. Show a weakness, you become a victim. Innocent refugees between felons.
Before coming in Bulgaria, I don't know the prison here. If I know, I never come.
Not enough food to fill your stomach. And a separate class of prisoners with privileges in the horror prison of Sofia. More on that soon. The day is coming to an end. In the prison yard, inmates are walking back toward the main building. Stanislav has finished his workout too. The other prisoners hate him, maybe because of his Nazi tattoos.
I'm a supporter of the Aryan Brotherhood, and that is their symbol, cloverleaf and swastika. That's common in US prisons, and I'm a fan.
In Bulgaria, Stanislav won't win a popularity contest with right-wing symbols like that.
That's where all my problems come from.
Bulgaria. Many inmates from a Roma background. Foreigners, Nazis, criminals, locked in, together, in one of the world's toughest prisons. Add to the mix seemingly bored prison guards who behind the scenes can set their own standards of cruelty. A completely run-down prison system. And atrocious sanitary conditions. A volatile mix. Especially for people who have come here more or less by accident, completely unprepared, and for the most part, innocent. Like refugees Rashid and Hamza from Afghanistan. Smugglers brought them to the Bulgarian border. There, the police arrested them.
The first, when I came here, sir, I was in 8 group. There was all the Bulgarians, and they beat us. Because we don't know, they said, one of them says, I'm killer, I killed somebody. Some says, I'm thief, I'm this, I'm this. They beat us and they're cleaning the floor from us and they wash the toilets. Hey, you have to do, because they know they are refugee. We are normal. Sometimes I'm afraid, sometimes, yeah. I think it's not good, sir. It's not good. Normal person is different, high criminal is, as psychology is not good, sir.
And the conditions?
Very tough, of course, because no good food, no electricity for 24 hours.
If they would have known what awaited them, they would have stayed in their war-torn country.
The situation is difficult. I've been injured for 6 months and I'm in pain, but the doctor cannot help me here. Isolation is really getting to me.
Bulgarian government don't put us again in prison. If they don't want us here, please send us back in Afghanistan. Before coming in Bulgaria, I don't know the prison here. If I know, I never come.
Refugees who would rather return to their war-torn country of Afghanistan than staying one more day in this prison. It gives us an idea how tough and relentless Sofia Central Prison is. All foreign convicts end up in Sofia Central Prison no matter where they committed their crimes in Bulgaria, no matter how small the crime. Only the worst of Bulgarian nationals, on the other hand, are sent here. Anything from 5 years to life. Robbers, rapists, murderers. Like Nevkov, 37 years old, 20-year sentence for attempted murder of 2 police officers. Is this really his cell, or was it switched for our camera crew? Nevkov has completely withdrawn into himself. The separation from his partner and daughter has taken a terrible toll.
I'm lucky that my girlfriend is waiting for me. That only happens once in a million times.
Visits of relatives are allowed only twice a month. A glass pane separates the inmates from their loved ones. Touching impossible. Relationships are hard to sustain.
Many of the prisoners here have been abandoned by the outside world. They don't have anyone anymore.
The only thing Nevkov can do is hope that his girlfriend is prepared to wait 20 years. One of the very few reliefs of prison life, mealtime. The few helpers who distribute the food are searched repeatedly before entering the station. The menu for this evening, once again, is soup with bread. The guards check the bowls carefully because the prisoners could smuggle contraband between the stations. Many of the men go to bed hungry after this beggar's-type meal. An inmate can count himself lucky if relatives and friends supply him with extra food. Although there are no refrigerators or stoves to prepare anything. It seems as if not even a small modicum of independence is allowed. The day in Sofia Central Prison ends after mealtime. And the next day begins like all the other days before it, stretching your legs behind bars, killing time, and looking forward to the prison yard in one of the toughest prisons in the world, in a country that is part of the EU, but does not implement the guidelines of the Union for its penal system. A prison where every inmate has less than 2 square meters of space to live, and where inter-prisoner violence is endemic, and guards allegedly harass the prisoners on a regular basis. In the foreigners' cell block, a man has been fighting for the rights of inmates for more than 8 years. When it comes to describing the conditions in Bulgaria's horror jail, the Australian Jock Paul Freeman does not mince his words.
This prison is so tough because to survive here, either you have to be psychologically strong or insane, or you go insane.
In Jock's eyes, it is primarily the lack of perspective that makes this prison one of the toughest in the world.
In Western European prisons, you have activity, you have daily activity, you go to work, you have school, you have education. Here, the majority of prisoners, 90% of them, are locked in their wings all day, every day, for years and years on end.
And the other 10%? They belong to an elite minority, inhabiting a comfortable parallel universe within prison walls.
There's no gangs in Bulgarian prisons, but there absolutely is a hierarchy, absolutely. Foreigners are kind of at the lowest on the totem pole. Then Roma are one tier above us. And then white Bulgarians are on the top of the totem pole. The guards sympathize with the white Bulgarian prisoners.
While the rest of the prisoners vegetate between cell and station, the white Bulgars use a modern and well-equipped boxing gym. The majority of these prisoners belong to organized crime. Trafficking, pimping, and extortion are the major offenses here. Zlatko is one of them. We wonder what he did on the outside.
You want from somebody to pay you for something he don't know, he don't want, or something like that. I don't know how to explain in English, but extortion, I think, is the word. Or racketeering, something like that.
In the boxing gym, the inmates are preparing for their time after prison, supported by former Bulgarian boxing champions. After all, exercise is important for harmonious coexistence.
If so many men are locked together in one place, there is, of course, aggression and violence. Therefore, it is important that there are things to do like fitness, painting, and so on. Some even like going to church.
An extensive leisure program for repeat offenders, too.
I was in here for the first time 10 years ago when I was much younger. Yes, when so many men are locked together, that's dangerous. There are all sorts of criminals in here. This is the largest prison in Bulgaria, after all.
Sofia Central Prison, a horror jail behind crumbling walls and barbed wire. Disparate treatment of prisoners. While the majority of prisoners enjoy 90 minutes yard time among crumbling facades as the highlight of their days, another elite group enjoys extensive hobbies. And innocent refugees waste away between felons. In one of the world's toughest prisons. Jacques-Paul Freeman has to tough it out another 12 years here in Sofia. He worries about his loved ones more than about himself.
My family want me back in Australia. And I think for them, sometimes it's harder for them than for me because I know in my mind that I'm okay, even when situation's really bad.
Perseverance. Stanislav wants to tough it out too. With concrete goals in mind, he has 3 more years left of the 15-year sentence he got for murder with robbery.
I hope I come out alive and healthy. My brothers live in Germany. I want to go there, live my life, in Munich. Like I did before, I'd like to work with motorcycles. I'd like to train children in motocross.
Commander Traiko Venkov and his group of wardens will continue to take decisive action with strict disciplinary measures to keep the prisoners in check. Permanent searches, arbitrary lockups, merciless punishment in the isolation cells. This is the way Commander Venkov and his team want to make better people out of criminals inside this horror jail. Hamza, the former detainee, is battling with nightmares and panic attacks.
I can't express it in words. When I look down, oh my God. I don't want to go in there ever again. I'm still afraid something could go wrong, and they'll drag me back.
He wants to leave the country this evening and return to Germany. Away from here, away from the horror prison in Sofia. a detention center in the EU that ignores all EU rules and regulations, where prisoners live on less than 20 square feet of space, at the mercy of ruthless, malicious, brutal prison guards who make their lives a living hell, away from one of the most brutal and ramshackle detention centers in the world, Sofia Central Prison, one of the world's toughest prisons.